The second part of our 5.3 notes asks us to solve two examples using mental math. So that means that for this part of the notes, we're not really going to be writing too much stuff down. We're more just going to be thinking about how to solve these proportions out. So I'm being asked to solve 3 halves, or 3 is to 2, as x is to 8, and determine what is the value of x that's going to make this equal to one another. Now, the way that it wants us to solve this out isn't using cross products, but it is comparing the numerators and comparing the denominators. As it says, step 1 asks to think about the product of 2 and what number is 8. So what do we need to multiply 2 by to get to 8? And we would say we need to multiply it by 4. And so step 2 says, because the product of 2 and 4 is 8, or 2 times 4 is 8, multiply the numerator by 4 to find x. So you would multiply 3 also by 4, because whatever you do to the top, you need to do to the bottom, and you would get that x is equal to 12. So very straightforward. So when you get problems like this that are simple enough, you don't have to necessarily do the cross products. You don't have to do 2 times x is equal to 24 and then divide by 2 and get that x is equal to 12. If you can do it mentally, then I definitely encourage you to do it mentally. And so for example 3, we're going to solve those proportions we set up previously for the tomatoes and the black beans. In example 1, we set up that proportion that in the original recipe, we have to use 1.5 cups of black beans for every 1 tomato. And then in the new recipe, we're gonna use 6 cups of black beans, and we need to determine how many tomatoes do we need to use in that case. So we're gonna also solve that out mentally and think about what does 1.5 need to be multiplied by to get to 6. So 1.5 needs to be multiplied by 4 to get to 6. And because 1.5 needs to be multiplied by 4 to get to 6, we're going to also multiply the bottom by 4, which means that the new number of tomatoes that we're going to use is 4. If we're going to multiply the number of black beans that we're going to use by 4, then we're also going to multiply the number of tomatoes we use by 4. In the original recipe, we used 1 tomato. 1 tomato times 4 is 4 tomatoes. So very straightforward with those kinds of problems, and we're going to be also just practicing that mental math here on your own. So you're not going to use any actual math to solve these out. We're just going to do these mentally. And for number 3, we're looking at 5 is to 8 as 20 is to d. So what is the value of d? Well, for 5 to get to 20, these two values that we do know, we can think that 5 times 4 would equal 20. And if 5 times 4 equals 20, then we need to also multiply the bottom numerator, that 8, by 4, which means that d would need to have a value of 32. Number 4, 7 to get to 14, we're going to multiply it by 2. So that means that z has to be multiplied by 2 to equal 10. So this one's backwards. So what number does z have to be so that when you multiply by 2, it equals 10? And I think we can all recognize that would have to be 5. And then for number 5, we have the unknown value over here above the 8. And we would say in this proportion that 21 is to 24 as x is to 8. These two values that we do know, we can see that if we work left to right, 24 to get to 8, we would need to divide it by 3. Or you could say 8 to get to 24, you would multiply it by 3. So that means that 21 is also going to need to be divided by 3, or we need to think what number times 3 gives me 21. And we would hopefully determine that x is equal to 7. Okay, number 6 is a word problem. A school has 950 students. The ratio of female students to all the students is 48 to 95. Write and solve a proportion to find the number f of students who are female. So the ratio of female students to all students is 48 to 95. 48 females to 95 all students. So I'm going to put S for students. And they were also told at the beginning that a school has 950 students. So that means that we can set up a proportion where the total number of students is 950, and we're being asked to determine how many female students are there. Well, as you can see here, we can also solve this one out mentally. So just because there's big numbers doesn't mean you need to get into that mental block. We've talked about getting out of that mental block that we can't do it. Because as you can see here, if we can turn 95 to 950, by multiplying it by 10. And if we multiply 95 times 10 to get to 950, then we can also take that numerator and multiply it by 10 to figure out how many female students the school has. 48 times 10 is going to equal 480 female students in the school. All right, so don't forget to write your summary, 2 to 3 sentences of what you learned during this video. Maybe on these notes you learned that how to write a proportion using a table, or maybe you learned how to do mental math by comparing the numerators and the denominators. So make sure you give me 2 to 3 sentences, full sentences of what you learned in order to receive your full credit.